hoped to be a forum discussion with Mr. Garrett, but I'm not surprised that he is not here today, although he initially accepted the invitation, but now he's declined. We are both running for Congress. He has an advantage because he's the incumbent, so we are both very busy. We both have very limited time, a couple of days before the election. But for him to make a promise to show up today and not show up last minute is making it seem as if his schedule is more important and more busy than all the people who are here today. So I'm here today because I want to be able to provide real representation for the constituents of this district. I'm proud to say now I have the endorsements of all the major newspapers in New Jersey, the Bergen Record, the Star-Ledger, as well as Scott Garrett's hometown Warden County newspaper, the Lehigh Valley Times, which has not endorsed a Democrat in over 40 years. They just endorsed me. So I'm here today because this is important. I think we have to have transparency, and I think we deserve, the constituents of this district deserve to hear from the people who want to represent them. So thank you so much.
This morning's the first panelist, Mr. Myung-gun Park. He's the president of New Jersey Korean American Chamber of Commerce.
지금 질문들이 경제 분야인데요. 두 가지 질문을 드리려고 합니다. 그래서 각각 한국말로 드리기 전에 먼저 간단히 개부터 설명드리는데 첫 번째 것은 우리 로이조 그 후보의 그 웹사이트를 가서 보니까 그 미니멈 웨이지를 갖다 자기는 찬성하고 있다고 하더라고요. 그래서 우리 한국 커뮤니티는 다 아다시피 이 레이버 인텐시브 주로 그 세탁소나 네일살롱 이렇게 상당히 미니멈 웨이지가 우리 그 자영업자들한테 큰 이슈가 되고 있는데 이런 부분을 지지하고 있고 그래서 상당히 저희가 이 스몰 비즈니스 하는 우리 오너들의 입장에서는 우리들의 방향하고 좀 배치가 되는 것 같아요. 이걸 우리한테 어떻게 저스티파이 할 수 있는 건지 질문을 하려고 그러고요. 두 번째는 아시다시피 이건 연방정부 레벨의 스테이트 레벨이 아닌 오바마 헬스케어가 사실 그 자영업자들한테 어떤 상당히 부담으로 다가오고 있는데 이런 문제는 상당히 크리티컬하게 우리가 비즈니스한테 그 문제가 되는 것 같고 그래서 이걸 질문을 하려고 그러니까 여러분들 이해를 좀 해주시기 바라겠습니다. Roy, thank you for your coming here. I'm going to ask you a first question regarding about I read your website and you are supporting about the minimum wage increase. As you understand about our Korean community, we are small business owner. This is very critical issue, and I want to listen from you. What is your position? How can increase minimum wage to justify our small business owner? Would you explain for us? And then justification for your Korean community, yes, especially small business owners.
Now, Mr. Garrett thinks that he's an economist. I think that there are economists who have studied this issue, who are experts in the long-term economic growth of our country. And there's been bipartisan reports about what's important for our long-term economic health. Now, of course, right now, we could think of it from a political partisan standpoint and say this is a Democrat issue or a Republican issue. But the reality is, the future, the long-term economic health and growth of our country depends on a strong middle class. If you look at the economic data, 70% of GDP growth is based on consumer spending. Now, who's spending the money in a down economy? Right now, after 2008, after the crash, consumer confidence is at an all-time low. So right now, unemployment is below 6%, but people are unemployed and people are long-term underemployed. You have people who have graduated from college and from law school and from medical school and who have graduate degrees who are not employed right now. So right now, consumer confidence is low, which means people aren't spending money. So the economic middle class is stagnant. And who does that hurt? That hurts small business owners. Now I understand, I'm Korean American. I know that Korean Americans start businesses at a rate 70% higher than other ethnic groups. I understand that small business ownership is the backbone of the Korean American community. Small business ownership is also the backbone for economic growth for many communities of color in this country. I understand that. I know the nail salons and the sektosos and all the small business owners who need help. So I understand very much that we have to support our small businesses. But there's other ways to support small businesses. Tax incentives, creative federal tax incentives that will generate growth. But what we also have to focus upon is how can we make sure that the consumer class has money in their pockets to spend money and reinvest that money into the economy. Now, I've talked to business leaders. I come from the business side. I do business law. So my job is to focus on how companies can grow in a very tough, difficult, and competitive economic climate. And when you talk to big business owners and small business owners, there's one thing that many people agree on, which is a strong middle class. And in order to have a strong middle class, sometimes we have to make short-term sacrifices to have long-term economic growth. So for me, I'm 33 years old, but the future of the country is not just about me and the next 5 years and what's best for me right now. The future of the country depends upon our future generations, my kids, my kids' kids, them having a strong middle class, which is the backbone of our country. Right now, we're facing increasing competition from China and from India and even some European countries. 10 years down the road, we need to make sure that our economy is the strongest economy in the global world, and in order to do that, we need to support our small businesses. But that being said, we also need a strong middle class, and raising the minimum wage is not just good for us. I realize it's going to be difficult for small business owners, but it's in everybody's long-term economic self-interest because that money gets reinvested into the economy, that money gets reinvested into the nail salons. When the middle class has money, they will go to the dry cleaner. They will go spend money in businesses, and that money will be reinvested into jiggering the economy, and we will be able to pull ourselves out of a down economy.
The Affordable Care Act is quite burden for business owners, especially here Korean community also, because that is mandatory the offering all employee health benefit. Even though Obama healthcare is started, but the premium is some of the level is competitive, but the deductible is high. That is another burden for the small business owners. What do you think of this? You are strongly supporting about Obama healthcare, right? But I think our community, some of our Korean members, maybe they got the benefit, but a lot of business also there is another burden. What do you think of it? This policy? I want to. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mr. Baktajani. So I'll start with a general, broad answer to the Affordable Care Act. I'll talk about that a little bit, and then I'll answer the second, more specific question of what impact the Affordable Care Act is having on small businesses, not only here in the 5th District, but also around the country. So the more broader question is, right now, we have two choices, right? Affordable Care Act has been deemed by the US Supreme Court to be the law of the land. This is not, again, Democrat or Republican. This is a Supreme Court that's been appointed, bipartisan. You have Democratic leading people as well as Republican leading judges in the Supreme Court, and they have ruled that this law, the Affordable Care Act, is our law right now. So now you have two arguments. Can we fix it and make it better to help people, including small business owners, or do we look backwards and try to repeal it? Now, even within the Republican Party, you have a small faction of people, small group within the Republican Party, the extremists, and what they want to do is counterproductive to moving forward. They want to repeal the Affordable Care Act. They also want to privatize Social Security and turn Medicare into a voucher system. They don't believe in any government involvement whatsoever. This is what the Tea Party believes. So I think from our perspective, there are a couple things that the Affordable Care Act does right. There are also a couple things that the Affordable Care Act does not do so well. For example, there's a medical device tax that the Affordable Care Act right now has in place. I think that should be repealed. The Affordable Care Act, for example, also places burdens on small business owners. If you have under 50 or under employees, then you have to provide healthcare insurance, obviously healthcare coverage for those employees. Now, from a small business perspective, I understand again that this is a burden that's being placed on small business owners because small business owners are not competing against only small businesses. Small business owners are competing against the Walmarts, the McDonald's, the large corporations that have the money to be able to provide healthcare coverage because they're large enough, they're more established. I have friends who are small business owners. They're first-time small business owners. Many people in the Korean American community are small business owners. And I understand that we have to provide incentives to help these small business owners compete. But again, when I think of these issues, when I think of the Affordable Care Act, I want to think about how we can be productive and how we can fix it. So for example, we should apply creative ideas to the 50 employee cliff. So any employee above 50, for example, your 51st employee that you hire as a small business owner, maybe just a portion of the insurance is covered by you as an employer. But again, there are creative solutions where you can do a partial coverage plan for 51 and up employees for small business owners, but these considerations have to be implemented. When Social Security, when Medicare was first put into place in this country, it was not perfect. There were a lot of problems that Social Security, Medicare initially had in this country that took years to be able to wrinkle through and be able to work out. But what we have an obligation to do right now as members of Congress is to not look backwards and be counterproductive, but to look forward. There are some good things that the Affordable Care Act does do right. For example, there are kids that I talk to in the district who are 26, 25, 24 years old. They've moved back home with their parents because they graduated from college, but they can't get a job. So they need health care coverage. So what the Affordable Care Act does, it lets them stay in their parents' coverage until the age of 26. Pre-existing conditions. Without the Affordable Care Act, insurance companies could discriminate against you and choose not to give you insurance or choose to make your insurance coverage prohibitively high. The Affordable Care Act is able to prevent against discrimination based upon pre-existing conditions. I understand, however, that individuals who are paying for their own insurance before the Affordable Care Act was put into place, some of these individuals' premiums have gone up. And I'm hearing from these people, and I understand that that's a real concern. So there are things that we have to fix from an individual perspective, and there are things that we have to fix from a small business perspective. But what we need are leaders, Democrat and Republican, who are going to come together, meet in the middle, and actually think about creative solutions and not just bury their heads in the sand and say things that are not true or accurate. Like, we have to repeal the Affordable Care Act and then everything for you will be okay. That's just not true. So let's focus on fixing it, let's focus on making it better, and let's hear from business owners, people like Mr. Mark Park, people like the business owners who are here today, and say what's working for you, what's not working for you, and figure out how I can go to Washington, D.C. as your member of Congress and fight for you. So when we have a bill, I can talk about putting appropriate legislative fixes into it so we can fix it. But what we need is a congressman that's going to fight for you, listen to you, be here for you, to be able to hear your concerns and take those concerns to Washington, D.C.
우리가 오랫동안 포괄적인 이민개혁 법안을 기다렸는데요. 결국 통과되지 않았고, 그래서 결국 오바마 대통령이 이번에 선거가 끝나고 나면 행정특령을 통해서 이민개혁을 추진할 것이라는 기대가 있습니다. 현재 어떤 합법적인 통로를 찾으실 수 없는 분들이 취업허가를 받는다거나 혹은 영주권을 신청할 수 있는 통로가 열릴지에 대한 기대가 많이 있는데요. 여기에 대해서 우리 로이조 후보께서 갖고 계시는 의견이 어떠신지가 궁금합니다. Roy, what is your position if President Obama was to take executive action to grant amnesty type of relief to undocumented aliens in this country now? For example, work permits or green cards. Are there specific actions you support or oppose?
So I think that the immigration debate right now that's occurring in Washington, D.C., or to be honest with you, is not occurring in Washington, D.C., is troubling to me. I came to this country at the age of 1. I was an immigrant myself. My parents came here in 1982. Many of the people in this room today immigrated to this country. So we have to understand two things in this country. We are a nation of laws, we are a nation of rules, but we are also a nation of immigrants. We are a nation of diversity. Great diversity that makes this country so great and so strong and so unique around the world. So these two things may seem as if they compete against each other, but they can be reconciled. And we have an obligation as politicians, we have an obligation as leaders to be able to come to some sort of an immigration agreement. Now, when I worked in law school, I went to law school at Georgetown, but I was also working full-time for a U.S. Senator, Senator Byron Dorgan. He was a moderate Democrat from North Dakota, and he was very involved in the immigration debate. He was a Democrat, but he was more anti-immigration. Now, I am an immigrant myself. I was also editor-in-chief of the Immigration Law Journal. And as the editor-in-chief of the Immigration Law Journal at Georgetown, my responsibility was to be able to get professors from law schools all around the country on both sides of the immigration debate, pro-immigration, anti-immigration, and we had to provide equal coverage to both of those and have conversation, dialogue, and arguments about immigration policy and immigration reform in this country. And what I learned from that experience while being the editor-in-chief of the Immigration Law Journal was that there still is a lot of commonality. We can still come to some sort of an agreement. So if you look at the US Senate, for example, you had President George W. Bush, a Republican, who was pro-immigration reform. He almost had a democratic stance on immigration. And then you had the Gang of Eight. You had senators in the US Senate, Democrat and Republican, who were able to come together with a passable bill. So in the United States government, the US Senate got a bipartisan agreement. They had it done. And then that agreement has to also go to the House to have a similar agreement in the US House of Representatives. And what happened was the Senate had a passable bill that the Republicans and Democrats agreed on, but the members of Congress in the House refused to even debate the issue because they were afraid of political pressure back home. So instead of taking the hard position and discussing it and debating it and arguing it in the US House of Representatives, they put their heads in the sand and they ignored their responsibilities to the congressional districts that they were representing. Scott Garrett, as a leader of the Republican Party in the House, is anti-immigration. He does not believe in immigration reform, and he's made this clear in past statements that he's made. And as a leader of the Republican-controlled US Congress, he has refused to take this debate up for debate. Now, this is a problem to me. In terms of the specific policy proposals that I'm in favor of, I am in favor of the DREAM Act. I think that children who are here through no fault of their own should not be punished. I think that we have to understand and recognize that whether it's H-1B visas and highly skilled workers who have backgrounds in STEM, in science and technology and engineering and mathematics, we need those high-skilled workers to compete and make American businesses stronger and more globally competitive. We need H-1B visas for that reason. On the low end, with low-wage workers, we have fruit and we have things that are dying on the vine because this is not being picked, because we do not have the low-wage American workers who are willing to do the work. We have parts of the country that are rural, that have farmland, and they need low-wage workers. So what we need here in the United States is we need sensible, common sense immigration reform. We need to discuss it. Why is a president acting alone through executive order with respect to immigration? I'll tell you, the reason why he's doing that is because Congress refuses to act. Congress has a responsibility to take up a hard vote and make a decision. Are you for immigration reform or are you not? Are you for the DREAM Act or are you not? Are you for a pathway to citizenship or are you not? You have to vote. That's why you have you in Congress. But right now, members of Congress are afraid that if they come on one side of this debate or the other side of the debate, they're afraid that their constituents back home may get angry and vote them out. So instead of doing their job, they're putting their heads in the sand and ignoring the problem. And I stand for comprehensive immigration reform that reconciles and remembers that we are both a country of laws, a country of rules, but we are also a country of immigrants and a country of great diversity.
Is there any specific action you would like to see from President Obama?
I think it's I think what I want to be able to see is not from President Obama, because I think President Obama has already acted with regard to the Central American immigrants who are coming in right now by hundreds of thousands. Some of them are fleeing some of the most dangerous parts of the country, of the world. They're fleeing extreme poverty and extreme violence, and they're risking their lives and taking long, dangerous journeys to come here to the United States because there is no clear immigration policy and because there's a lot of misinformation being spread. When people around the world who are in some of the poorest parts of the world believe that they can come to the United States and become a citizen because they don't understand the immigration process, then you're going to continue to have this problem. But what you're seeing is, again, President Obama is acting alone by executive order, which is not democratic. We need congressional input. And until Congress acts, until Congress is able to do what the US Senate was able to do by coming to some sort of an agreement with both Democrats and Republicans on board, the president will continue to act alone. So what I want to be able to see is not the president acting, I want to see Congress act. I want to see Congress actually take a position on this and really take up immigration reform.
Can I ask one more follow-up question on that?
Second question is very quick.
Just to clarify, you would rather not see President Obama issuing any amnesty type of relief this time, but work through the Congress until it works out?
I think Congress needs to take this up. I think the president acting by executive order, I think, is problematic. And he's doing that because you have congressional inaction. You have congressional refusal to take up the immigration debate.
제가 이민법을 16년째 다루면서 그 이민 변호사 협회를 통해서 얻는 컨센서스는 이민법이 현재 그 어느 때보다도 반이민 정서가 팽배하다는 그런 의견을 듣고 있습니다. 그리고 그것은 저희 커뮤니티에서도 느끼고 있는 문제인데요. 예를 들어서 최근 신문에서도 보셨겠지만 노동청에서 영주권 케이스를 감사하는 율이 40%가 넘었고요. H-1B, L-1 비자 이런 취업 비자들에 대한 기각률도 히스토리컬리 역사적으로 가장 높은 상황입니다. 그래서 최근에는 또한 아이스 어터니인 미스터 러브라는 사람이 다큐멘을 폴즈해서 추방령을 이기려고 하는 그런 사례도 있었습니다. 그래서 이런 government agency에 있는 바이어스에 대해서 우리 후보님이 갖고 계신 의견을 듣고 싶습니다. So there is growing concern that anti-immigration bias exists in our government agencies. For example, DOL audit rates are above 40% for green cards. H-1B, L-1 visa denial rates are the highest in our history. Even an ICE attorney has been sued for forging a document. So about these trends, what is your interpretation? And what would you like to see to make sure such biases do not exist in our government agencies?
I think this is a major problem. I think that there definitely is an anti-immigrant bias that exists from an administrative standpoint, but I think more problematically, in local congressional districts across the country, I think certain members of Congress, Republicans, more so than Democrats, have been really playing upon these anti-immigration fears to be able to win re-election. So I think when I talk to people about this debate, people are recognizing that you're using fear, you're using information that's not true, you're basically using economic data that is stale to say that the reason why you are hurting, the reason why you don't have a job, the reason why you are poor, the reason why your kid can't get a job after they graduated from college is because the immigrants are taking your jobs. And that's inaccurate, it's misleading based upon the economic data. You're recognizing again that we, from both a low-wage worker as well as a high-wage worker, we need workers here to be able to do the jobs that Americans are unable or unwilling to do. And this leads to long-term economic growth and job creation here in the United States. We need to broaden our tax base. We need to be able to bring in people from the shadows. But again, what's troubling to me is that you have members of Congress, including Scott Garrett, who plays upon these anti-immigration fears that are not justified or supported by reality. And I think that's problematic because Scott Garrett, during election time, will come, a couple of weeks before, a couple months before the election, he'll visit a Korean church, or he'll go to a Hispanic church, or he'll go to an African-American NAACP dinner. But then you look at his record on immigration reform, he gets a 0% rating from advocates on immigration reform because he refuses to take it up. When you look at his record from the African-American community, he showed up at the NAACP dinner a couple of weeks ago. I was there with Cory Booker and I was there with Congressman Bill Pascrell. On the table, there was a report card from the NAACP that rated every member of Congress and Senate from New Jersey on their record for inclusiveness and for civil rights reform. And Bill Pascrell and Senator Cory Booker both got an A. Scott Garrett got an F. But he still shows up to the dinner. So right now he knows he needs your vote. He knows that I'm a Korean American. So he wants to be able to peel off my natural base of support. So he's going to go to the Korean Americans at the churches, at the festivals, and he's going to say, you're a business owner, I'm a Republican, you're a Republican, you should vote for me. And he's going to lie to you. But the reality is, we cannot be misled. Because this isn't just about me being a Korean American, this is about the issues. And we are all immigrants in this room. And Scott Garrett is anti-immigration. So he wants you to vote against your own interests as an American, as an immigrant who is a part of this country's economy, who is a part of this country's history. So that's offensive to me that he's going to try to do that, and that it's offensive to me that he's going to play political games. He's going to commit to doing a debate today, so I show up, and then he's not going to show up. And I know where he is today. He's campaigning, because he's been spotted in other parts of Bergen County. So he's not talking to you right now, he's talking to other voters. Just, I want you to remember that come election day on Tuesday, November 4th.
지금 로이조 후보와 현역인 스캇 게럿 의원의 가장 큰 차이라 그러면 아마 경력일 겁니다. 스캇 게럿 의원은 육선으로서 지금 12년 동안 의원직을 수행을 하고 있고요. 지금 이제 로이조 후보는 이번에 당선되면 첫 터움입니다. 그 모든 의회나 연방의회도 그렇고 주의회도 그렇고 항상 그런 조직에는 선임자만이 가질 수 있는 그런 베네핏이 있습니다. 그런데 이제 그 이번에 로이조 후보한테 제가 묻고 싶은 거는 과연 그 선임자를 두고 우리가 새로운 의원을 뽑아야 하는 이유와 또 그래서 그 지역 주민들에게 어떤 혜택이 돌아올 수 있는지 그걸 묻고 싶고요. 그리고 두 번째 질문은 이렇게 한인이나 중국인처럼 그 소수계 의원들이 갖는 그 아이러니가 한 번씩 생깁니다. 예를 들어서 한인 커뮤니티와 다른 인종 커뮤니티 간에 어떤 그 이해가 상충되는 그런 일이 발생했을 때 그 의원으로서 굉장히 입장을 밝히기가 어느 한쪽을 편을 들 수도 없고 그런 좀 그 굉장히 어려운 일이 생길 수가 있는데요. 그래서 그런 부분에서 어떻게 지혜롭게 헤쳐나갈지 그런 두 가지 질문을 저는 하려고 합니다.
Okay, Roy, you have been criticizing Representative Scott Garrett for not doing enough for his district, but as you know, it is often said that the freshman members of the Congress is difficult to get the resources to what the community needs compared to senior member like Scott Garrett. So, given that consideration, why voters of the 5th district should vote for you instead of 6th term Scott Garrett?
Thank you, Danny. Of course, House seniority is definitely going to be able to provide you with the ability, for example, to become a chairman of a subcommittee. It'll provide you with a bigger platform to be able to bring funding home to your congressional district. That is true. But the reality is Scott Garrett has been in office since 2002. He's been there for a long time. He's a career politician, because before that he was in the New Jersey State Assembly for almost a decade before that. And if you look at it, despite his long record of public service, when he's been a politician his entire life, his entire adult life, despite all that experience that he has, despite being on the Budget Committee and being a subcommittee chairman of a very powerful financial services committee, despite him having seniority, despite him being there for a long time and being on very powerful committees, he's done absolutely nothing for the people of this district. Now, when you had the possibility of getting federal funding to fix our bridges and roads and to invest in our infrastructure, he had an opportunity to vote for that. You had every member of Congress from New Jersey, Democrat and Republican, who is in favor of surface transportation bill, which provides federal dollars to invest in our bridges and roads. Scott Garrett was against it. Now you have 435 congressional districts in the entire country. And the way that our government is set up, each member of Congress in each of these 435 congressional districts has a responsibility, has an obligation to go down to Washington, D.C. and fight for the interests of the people who live in his or her congressional district. Now, Scott Garrett is a Tea Party Republican. Now, many of the people in this room today are Democrats. Many of the people here today are Republicans. The Tea Party Republican Party believes that there should be no role for federal government to play. Not that it should be limited, but it should basically disappear. So now, why do I bring that up? Because I bring that up because Scott Garrett's in Washington, D.C. He's supposed to be representing your interests. He's supposed to be fighting to get federal dollars invested here. Now, I was just recently at a press conference with Congressman Bill Pascrell, who doesn't represent this part of the district. He represents Palisades Park, Fort Lee, and some other towns. But he was able to get millions of dollars of funding for the town of Paramus, for their police department, to make the community more safe. And he was able to secure that funding because Scott Garrett doesn't believe in fighting for those dollars. Now, Scott Garrett claims to be a fiscal conservative. I come from the business side. I do business corporate law. So I also am a fiscal conservative. But the difference between him and me is the truth, which is when Scott Garrett doesn't fight for federal dollars to come back here, home to you, that money doesn't go back into your pockets. You don't get a check from government saying, okay, he fought for you, here's $100 this week. No, that doesn't happen. That money goes to other congressional districts in other parts of the country that benefit from it. So despite the fact that Scott Garrett's been there for a long time and he's on these two committees, he brings home no federal funding for projects that will benefit the people here. Now, of course, when I win, God willing, on November 4th, I will be a member of Congress. I will be a freshman, as Danny said, but this will also potentially be, as the New York Times just wrote, this could potentially be the biggest political upset in the entire country. And that's important because that will give me a bigger platform. Another quick example to speak to that point is Senator Cory Booker. Senator Booker is a freshman member of the US Senate. He's only been there for a small period of time. Before that, he was a mayor. But his time as mayor means nothing in the US Senate because that doesn't translate into seniority. But as a freshman member of the US Senate, Senator Cory Booker is doing more than Scott Garrett has done since being elected in 2002. The first piece of legislation that Senator Booker is working on right now is prisoner reform. He's working with a Republican, a very conservative Republican named Rand Paul, and they are able to put their differences aside and focus on the issues in the middle that matter to a lot of people, and they recognize that prison reform is an issue that impacts everybody. So again, that's just an example of what we can do as a freshman member of Congress in a congressional district that nobody expected us to be able to win even a couple of months ago. I will be able to have a big platform, and I will go down to Washington, D.C. And even though I'm a freshman, I will fight, and I will work with Republicans, and I will work to aggressively get federal funding invested into our community, into our congressional district.
Thank you. The second one, it is sometimes challenging for ethnic politicians, for your case, Korean member of the Congress, to maintain the relationship between the communities. From your own community, which is Korean community, and other racially different communities. So when it comes to facing very delicate and sensitive issues, your position should be very, very difficult to support either party. So if you're elected and then got into that kind of situation, how are you going to find a solution?
So I think that I'm fortunate in a way because I grew up when I was younger with very few Korean Americans because there weren't too many Korean Americans. There were almost no Korean Americans in my town. So I was only, oftentimes the only Korean American, and all my friends were, Italian, Jewish, Irish, African American, everything but Asian because I didn't have any other Asian kids. So my entire life I've really focused on how I can persuade people. How can you get people that come from different backgrounds, that have different last names, different ethnic backgrounds, how can you get them to see you not as the Asian guy, not as Bruce Lee, but to see you as an American who shares the same values? And from a very young age, that's what I've been doing since I was a little kid. And even in this political campaign, for the last year and a half, that's what I've also been doing. Because when I first started this campaign a year and a half ago, there are no Korean Americans in US Congress or US Senate right now. There's only been one in history. So a lot of the people who are not Korean Americans said to me, Roy, we can't support you because, first of all, they said the Korean American community doesn't vote. Then they said, number two, the Korean American community is not unified. So they said, how do you think that you can win over not only the small minority of Korean American voters, but everybody else who's not Korean American? They said to me it would be impossible. So a lot of people told me to give up, but I did not give up. And I fought hard over a year and a half to convince everybody from within the Korean American community to non-Korean American people who are Italian, Irish, Jewish, Latino, African American. I convinced them over a year and a half to support me. Senior citizens, veterans organizations, women's groups, the Irish American Association, all these different groups now have become my strongest supporters. They didn't believe in me at first because they doubted. But now, through hard persuasion and through hard work, they believe that my values as a Korean American, our values as Korean Americans, are also American values. And as a small minority, that does not have the political representation or the political power that we need and deserve, it's important for us to, number one, be unified, which is why I'm excited to be able to have the other Korean American elected officials, local members of council from Bergen County who are here with us today. It's important for us to be able to show unity and strength, and it's also important for us to be able to show people that we are the same. So that same message that I've been giving to people since I was a little kid, that Korean American values are also American values, that same message that I've been giving on this campaign journey for the last year and a half is the same message that I hope to bring to Washington, D.C. And I'm confident that when we come together and if we unify, then we will be able to provide that voice. And there are, of course, going to be sensitive issues. I'm not telling you it's going to be easy. It's going to be a very difficult balancing act. I think that other political leaders who are Korean American, including Mayor Kim, including the council members who are here today, they've dealt with this sensitivity because we are Korean American, so automatically people who are not Korean American may see my stance on a particular issue, whether it's immigration or whether it's the Comfort Women Monument, any of these other issues that are very sensitive to Korean Americans. Other people will say, Roy's only supporting that because he's Korean American. So what we have to be careful of is to do this balancing act, which is not going to be easy. But I'm here today to tell you that I am Korean American. I understand our values. I understand my family's Korean American. I was born in South Korea, and our values are American values. So I think that there's a way to bridge the gap. There's a way to be able to bring everybody together, but it's going to take hard work, and it's going to take persuasion, and it's going to take understanding from you as a Korean American community. And Scott Garrett had an alternative budget plan that was to the right. It was even more conservative than Paul Ryan's budget plan was. And what he wanted to do, Scott Garrett's budget plan would have done, is to essentially privatize Social Security and turn Medicare into a voucher system. And I think he again claims to be a fiscal conservative. He claims to be somebody that is looking out for taxpayer dollars. Now again, I am also a fiscal conservative, and I don't take taxpayer dollars lightly. This is money that we work hard for as business people in the community. This is money that we earn, we pay our taxes, and I don't take that lightly. I don't want to tax people, I don't want to spend your money unwisely. What I also understand is that it's Social Security and Medicare. I'm going to say two things about it. First of all, what I believe from a principle standpoint is when people call this entitlements, I think that's the wrong word. Because people, as Americans, are paying your taxes into the system. You've been made a promise by the government that when you get older, you'll be taken care of. That's the promise of Medicare. That's a promise of Social Security. It's something that's embedded into our social fabric as a nation. This is a security blanket upon which we believe and upon which we rest. So I believe in principle that these are not entitlements, but that these are things that we earned as all Americans. These are things that our children, as they grow older, will also earn. It's a promise that our country has made to our citizens. It's a social contract, a social compact. Now, saying that, I also think that Social Security and Medicare, that these issues cannot be looked at in a vacuum because they are not the only, because these issues do not exist alone. You have to be able to look at long-term revenue generation to figure out how we can have the funds, how we can broaden our tax base, and how we can continue to be able to have the resources available to responsibly address the budget deficit, but also to focus upon how we can keep our promise to our citizens. So my point is, Scott Garrett's argument, a lot of Republicans' arguments for this, conservative Republicans, not moderates, but conservative Republicans, they say, Social Security, Medicare, this has to be privatized. Let the market take care of it, let people pay for this themselves, and the government can't be involved because this is government waste. That's what the extreme right is arguing. That's what Scott Garrett is arguing. What I'm arguing is that we have a commitment to keep this responsibility, this promise to our seniors. And we have to focus upon other ways to create long-term revenue generation because it's not just about spending, it's about investing wisely and creating jobs right now, broadening our tax base, investing in clean and alternative energy so we can cut our foreign dependence on oil and create jobs here and make us more globally competitive and strong, have smart federal tax incentives, and in some cases government grants to be able to rejigger the local economies in parts of this district, including Bergen County and even Sussex County, to get the local economy stimulated. It's talking about broadening our tax base by investing in our bridges and in our roads and in our infrastructure so we can again cut our foreign dependence on oil, but also make the efficiency of our transportation network go up, which brings up the real estate values of our homes, which gets more dollars reinvested into our local economies, which broadens our tax base, which will provide us with the money that we need to be able to continue to keep our promise to our seniors who have worked hard, who have earned their right to be able to pay into the system, and have been given a promise by the government that the government will be there for them when they are too old to take care of themselves. So the reality from my perspective is, I think all of these issues are interconnected. You can't just look at cutting and fiscal discipline and cutting the tax base and say that this is going to generate long-term economic growth, because it's not going to. What we need creative, forward-thinking solutions from the private sector. Now, I believe that the market does incredible things, and we have to be able to harness the creativity and the ingenuity that exists in the private sector, and we have to apply it to Washington, D.C. Now, any politician in Washington, any lifelong career politician can easily say, I'm a fiscal conservative. That doesn't mean anything. I can say I'm a fiscal conservative today, and it again doesn't mean anything. What we need are ideas. What we need is creativity. Because Social Security, Medicare, the looming crisis for the baby boomer generation, this is a real problem, and we have to address it. But addressing it is not just having empty sentences that say, we have to cut Social Security, Medicare, and privatize it, because that doesn't solve the long-term problem. We need to find alternative long-term revenue sources. That's our responsibility as members of Congress. That's our responsibility of our US senators. So as a member of Congress, what I hope to do is get into conversations with business leaders, people who work in the business community, and focus upon how we can get private capital and private dollars invested into our economy. Public-private partnerships, infrastructure banks. There's a lot of creative stuff that's happening across the country that's leading to long-term, very real economic stimulation and job growth. And these things are all connected to our problem with the looming crisis with Social Security, Medicare, because we have to broaden the base and we have to find alternative sources of revenue to address this problem.
실제적으로 지금 현재 저희 커뮤니티 중에서 이제 메디케이드를 받고 혜택을 받고 있는 시니어분들이 굉장히 많으신데요. 실제적으로 좀 느끼고 계시는지 모르시겠지만 메디케이드를 가지고 한국 닥터 오피스에 가려고 하면 메디케이드를 안 받는 닥터들이 굉장히 많습니다. 그래서 전화를 굉장히 많이 오세요. 메디케이드 받는 닥터들을 소개해달라고. 근데 이게 지금 메디케이드가 닥터들이 안 받는 이유는 정부에서 메디케이드의 의료 수가를 너무 낮게 책정을 해놨기 때문에 의사들이 현재 메디케이드 환자들을 보게 되면은 실제적으로 본인이 시간당의 그 노동 그거에 맞게 벌이를 할 수가 없어요. 그렇다고 해서 의사들한테는 이게 미션이 무조건 너희가 손해를 보더라도 메디케이드 환자를 무조건 봐라 라고 하기도 참 힘든 상황입니다. 그러다 보니까 지금 현재 의료가 어떻게 진행이 되고 있냐면 메디케이드를 억셉트하는 닥터들은 환자를 굉장히 제한된 시간에 빠르게 봅니다. 많은 환자를 보기 위해서죠. 그렇다는 것은 지금 좋은 의료를 제공할 수가 없는데 불행하게도 지금 메디케어를 안 받는 또 닥터들이 늘어나고 있습니다. 그래서 제 두 번째 질문은 메디케어를 안 받는 닥터들이 늘어나고 있다면은 결국은 메디케어가 우리가 유지되더라도 똑같이 메디케이드처럼 우리가 닥터를 보기 힘들어지고 그러면은 그 닥터 오피스에 가더라도 몇 번밖에 진료를 못 받고 그렇게 되지 않을까라는 걱정에서 로이에게 가는 질문입니다. 어떤 플랜을 갖고 있는지. 예, my second question. So actually for now, many Medicaid patients cannot find those Korean physicians who accept the Medicaid. And I see also the same situation in Medicare patient too, because there is a slight increase of number of physicians who do not accept Medicare also. So even though you and we could preserve the Medicare as it is or in the better way, maybe in the future we might have the same issue in the Medicare patients too. So do you have any plan to preserve not only the payment or premium of Medicare, but also the quality of care to the Medicare patients?
Yes, I think this is a major problem. I think this is one of the issues that also are facing the Affordable Care Act implementation. For example, under the Affordable Care Act, you have individuals who are looking for particular specialist services. And if you live in a rural area, for example, that particular specialist that you may need to see, you're not going to be able to have access to that person, that particular doctor, that particular specialist. So I think not only in terms of being able to be covered in the first place and to have medical coverage, but in terms of the broadening the services that are provided, this is something that we have to be focusing upon and addressing. I'm on the board of a medical-based nonprofit. It's called the Bergen Volunteer Medical Initiative. We were just at the gala last night. They raised a tremendous amount of money. And what this organization does, it's a nonprofit, but they provide free medical care, free medical services to everybody. You know, regardless of whether you're documented, undocumented, regardless of whether you're a citizen or not citizen, if you can come in and prove that you don't make a particular, that you don't hit a certain threshold of income, then we have doctors from Valley Hospital, from Hackensack Medical Center, from all over, even some doctors from New York City who come specifically to volunteer their time, and they provide you with general care, but they also have specialists who will come in, for example. And I think that you're seeing this happening at a community level. You're seeing organizations like the Bergen Volunteer Medical Initiative that are really addressing this issue of making sure that people not only have the knowledge as to who they should go see, but also that they receive the type of services that can be provided for them. So I think this is something that we definitely have to address. But what I also will say is, the reality is I'm a 33-year-old business attorney. You know, I'm not an expert on any of these issues, and I don't think any of the politicians in Washington, D.C. are experts on these either. But I think the problem, one of the root problems that we have right now in Washington, D.C. is that politicians are making decisions based upon their political expediency. So they're getting campaign contributions from special interest money, whether it's big pharmaceutical companies, whether it's large insurance companies, whether it's Wall Street investment banks, and they're not listening to small business owners. They're not listening to people like Priscilla and like Judy, who understand specifically medical services that would have to be provided, as well as immigration services that have to be provided, because they don't need to listen to you. They have their money. Scott Garrett has $3.5 million in special interest money. So I think the root problem is campaign finance reform, because until you get money out of politics, politicians in Washington, D.C. who are not experts in any of these fields will just do things based upon who funds their campaigns. And it's not going to be individuals like Priscilla or Judy or business owners like Mark. It's going to be people in Washington, D.C. who are lobbyists. Those are the people with the biggest microphones. Those are the people who are writing American policy. And this is a major problem today, is we no longer have experts. We no longer have expert input at the local community level as to what's working and what's not working. So 2 nights ago, I was in New York City. I had my last big New York City fundraiser, and we were with Professor Larry Lessig of Harvard Law School. And he's a founder of Mayday PAC, which is a campaign finance reform PAC that focuses upon the root problem of money in politics. And what Professor Lessig said that night is he said, his main issue is actually healthcare. This is what he thinks is the most important issue that we have to fix in this country. But he said, until you can pull out the money from politics, we can't talk about healthcare. We can't talk about women's rights. We can't talk about the environment, because the only people that can actually have input are going to be lobbyists and special interest money. Now, me running for Congress as a first-time candidate with the support of the amazing Korean American community and also the non-Korean American community, we've been able to raise a tremendous amount of money. We've raised over $1.2 million, which is a lot to raise for a challenger. But still, that pales in comparison to what Scott Garrett has. Scott Garrett has over $3 million because of the committees that he serves on. And because of all the money that he has, he doesn't think that he has to really take your input into account. So he's not listening to the experts who understand this, who work in nonprofits, who do this for a living. He's not listening to them. He's listening to the lobbyists on K Street who fund his campaign. So I think what I want to be able to do as a member of Congress is, first, we have to make sure we go out and vote and win on November 4th. But once I'm in Congress, I don't want to be relying on special interest money. I want to talk to the constituents, talk to the experts at the community level, and ask them, well, what's working? What's not working at the local level? Because that's what Congress is supposed to be doing, but it's not working right now.
I want to save time, but I have a concern about the Bergen County. As you understand about the right lane project is for a long time still, the holding. And I'm almost recently I read articles about it. They are talking about to extend from the again no, not the Union Town to the Inglewood, right? How you going to support, because this is very critical to our Korean community, because there is a light rail connected to the existing the light rail, but there is we need a lot of fund, especially state government match 50% fund and federal government match about 50% of fund. How, if you go to the House of Representatives, how you going to support about this project? I want to hear from you. Okay.
So, people ask me what's your one most important issue. If you had to pick one committee or one issue that you've been talking about from a year and a half ago up until now, for me, it's been transportation, transportation, transportation. I've been saying it, I've been talking about it, and it's funny because it's made an impact. Now Scott Garrett realizes, his polls show that the polls have tightened, and they've tightened for a number of reasons, but he recognizes that me talking about transportation has really resonated, because people in the district are saying, oh, Roy, people are saying, that's a transportation guy. He's talking about transportation all the time. So just recently at the Warren County radio debate, we had the discussion about the ARC, the access to the Regent's Court. Basically, it was going to be an additional tunnel that was built from northern New Jersey into New York City. And this is when I worked at the Port Authority, I was studying the economic impact of having an additional tunnel. This would have eased traffic and congestion for the Holland Tunnel, the Lincoln Tunnel, as well as the GW Bridge. It would have created jobs, and it would have helped everybody in northern New Jersey get back and forth into New York City. Now, Scott Garrett, when Governor Christie canceled the project, Scott Garrett praised him. He said that was the right decision. We don't need it. It's wasteful. But now, a week ago, the Bergen Record said that they were surprised, because all of a sudden, at the Warren County debate, they asked Scott Garrett, Roy supports transportation funding. Roy supports investing in transportation. You do not. You have not once talked about transportation, but now they asked him, would you support the tunnel if they were to build it again? And he said yes. That's because of my message, and he's recognizing now that he's in trouble. But the problem with him saying yes is then we had $8 billion of federal money that would have been going towards this one tunnel. Now that money is gone. It's been used up. Back then, in 2004, it would have cost New Jersey $300 million. Now, the current project will cost New Jersey $3 billion. So if we had proved it back then, we would have it. But now, it's much more expensive, and we don't even know where the money's going to come from. So that's a major issue. Now, with Mr. Mark Park Hedgem's question about the light rail that goes to Englewood, we have to fight for federal dollars and state dollars for investing in light rail, investing in transportation, but more importantly, there's private dollars available. I worked on a deal at my firm, at Kirkland & Ellis, where we partnered up with a private equity firm. And there was private equity dollars, private investor dollars that were invested in the state of Connecticut. And what that did was private dollars matched state dollars and federal funding. It was a public-private partnership, and private investors made money off of toll collection. Now, if you're going to have light rail, that's ridership. So every rider that rides the light rail has to pay a fee, and private investors who help fund this project can get a small portion of those ridership fees, and private investors can make money, and you can get matching state and federal dollars. But in order to get that money, you need somebody on the Transportation Committee in Washington, D.C., who's going to fight for that funding. And right now, the 5th District does not have that. So what I want to be able to do is go to Washington, D.C., get a seat on the Transportation Committee, and I want to fight for those dollars from the federal government, and I want to find creative sources of private revenue from New York, from private equity firms that are investing in infrastructure in Connecticut, Minnesota, and California, but they're not doing it here because no one's fighting for matching federal funds. I will fight for that, Mr. Park Hedgem.
Since the audience is mostly Korean, and inevitably we are Korean American, what does the date August 15, what significance does it have to you? And Mr. Scott Garrett over the years has visited multiple occasions the memorials across Bergen County and spoken about Korean independence on August 15th. And if you have any experiences like that yourself, I'd appreciate if you could share this.
I think that Scott Garrett likes to, again, I think I may play a little politically here because I'm a little angry that he's not here today. I wanted to come here and debate him and at least have a forum, but he's not here. So I think it's a disservice to you that he's not here to defend himself. So I'm going to just basically tell you how I feel. I think what Scott Garrett does with the Korean American community is highly offensive. I think he does this with other communities as well. It's not just the Korean American community. But I think for political purposes, he recognizes where can I get the most bang for my buck, right? He doesn't want to fight. The Voting Rights Act does. It prevents discrimination at the polls for communities of color and for ethnic minorities, for example. So it says you can't have a poll tax. You can't have an education requirement. If you're an American citizen, you are entitled to vote, and that's what the Voting Rights Act does. And it was up for reauthorization in 2006. And if you look at the ballots, when you go to vote in Bergen County, it has Korean, it has Hangul on it, it's Hangul on it, right? It's Korean where it's on the ballot, and it also has Spanish. And it has those languages on there because of communities of color, because there's a big Korean American population in Bergen County, there's a big Spanish-speaking population in in Bergen County, and because of that, the Voting Rights Act ensures that when people go to vote, they can have those languages on their ballot. Scott Garrett was one of 33 members of the entire U.S. House, 33 out of 435, who voted no on the Voting Rights Act. He's consistently taken an anti-immigration position in his stance in Congress, but he will show up on August 15th, and he will say, this is an important day for Korea. I am here to show support, but he doesn't vote to show you support. If I can give you one example really quickly, he showed up to a black church, African-American church, and what he got up there, he spoke about being a Christian. Okay, he spoke about being a born-again Christian. Now, I'm a Christian too. But he showed up to talk about his Christian religion because he was in a black church. And the pastor said thank you. After Scott Garrett spoke and sat down, the pastor of this church, who was an African American, he's a great man, he got up there and he said, Scott, thank you for being here today on Martin Luther King Day. This is what the holiday was. Thank you for being here to remember Martin Luther King, and thank you for your speech. It was very powerful. Thank you for telling us you're a Christian. And he said, I'm a little bit surprised because you sure don't vote like a Christian. And his point was, it's not about showing up on a holiday. It's about working every single day in Washington, D.C. to benefit the people that you represent as a member of Congress. So, my commitment is not just to go around and stop off at a holiday and get a proclamation and say, 감사합니다, 안녕하세요, but fight for the issues that are important to our community. And one of the most important issues that is important to our community is immigration reform. So I'm going to go there, I'm going to fight for these issues, and even if I don't show up on August 15th because I'm too busy working for our interests, know that my heart is in the right place, and I'm going to fight for the issues that are actually important for us, not just show up to get a photo op. I think that what we need, we need leadership, we need people at the federal level that look like us, not to show people that we're any different, but to show people that we are the same. I've been saying this for a long time, but right now we have an opportunity to make history. Now, I'm a Korean American, as you know, and it's been a very difficult journey. The last year and a half has been very difficult. But what's even more difficult for me was when I was a kid, when I was growing up in New Jersey. And growing up in the suburbs of New Jersey, you face racism. You face, it's hard. People are going to be jealous of you if you do good in school. You get into college, you get into a good school, people will be jealous of you. If you do good at a sport, other people will be jealous of you. And right now you see that, with Bergen Academy, for example. The Bergen Academy is where there's a large Korean American population, or even in New York City, you have Stuyvesant, which has a large Korean American population, large Asian population, and a lot of people who are not Asian, a lot of people who are not Korean American say, oh, the Koreans are taking over, the Asians are taking over. And there's a lot of anti-Asian sentiment because of that. So whether it's because we're doing well and people are jealous, or just because we're alone growing up in the suburban New Jersey like I did, and you have no one that looks like you, so people will make comments and jokes about, Bruce Lee or Ching Chong or this, and people will say that because they're kids. It's not a big deal. But when you're a young kid, it is a big deal. It's hurtful, it's harmful. At the national level now, we're talking about bullying, psychological bullying that happens across the board to everybody, regardless of whether you're, white, black, Asian, or anything in between. All kids have a difficult time growing up in society today because of social media. Even 20 years ago, 10 years ago, someone could make fun of you as a kid or punch you in the face and it'd be over. It's kids being kids. But nowadays, with social media, they'll punch you in the face, they'll make fun of you, and they'll tape it. And it'll be on YouTube, and it'll go on Facebook, and everyone will see it. And all of a sudden, you have the rising rates of adolescent depression, adolescent suicide. And I think that this is going to be more and more a problem for communities like our own when you have no leaders in the community who look like us. So when I was younger, I would say to myself, I want to be in political office one day and I want to be able to make a big change. But I would look at the textbooks and the history books and there was no one that looked like me. So my political heroes were Martin Luther King, my political heroes were JFK, my political heroes were people who looked nothing like me, who didn't sound like me. So as a young kid growing up, as we all do, we're all insecure, we're all minorities, it's insecure, it's difficult growing up. You have a lot of frustration. And I think that type of frustration, it hinders our ability to dream. The President of the United States, Barack Obama, there's a picture in the White House of President Obama, and he's reaching down, he's bending his head down, and there's a young black child, African-American boy, who's reaching up and touching his hair, right? And that photo has been in the White House the longest, because what that one image tells every other kid who looks different, every other kid who feels like he or she is an underdog, every little kid who feels as if there is no hope, that kid can say, the President of the United States, he has hair that feels like my hair. And that's a very powerful image. So I think, a lot of people told me that this would be impossible. A lot of people told me I should give up and that, Korean Americans cannot be in US Congress because there is no precedent right now. There's nobody in Congress that looks like me. If I had given up then and listened to everybody else, then we wouldn't be here today. We'd be all at work or doing something different with our lives. And instead, we have fought. We have come together as a community. I am excited and honored of what the Korean American community has been able to do and show people that we do care about representation. There are issues that are important to us, and we will not be manipulated, we will not be tricked, and we will not be fooled. Because the most important thing for our elected officials to do is to serve our interests. I don't just mean as Korean Americans, but everybody who lives in this district. So in terms of what type of impact I can have for these young children who are growing up, and it doesn't matter if they're growing up with a lot of Korean American friends, it doesn't matter if they're growing up with no Korean American friends, we need to send a message to them that they can dream, that they can fight, and that there is no ceiling, there is no barrier for their ambition and their success. Because if we do not encourage that type of ambition, then they can never rise to be the person that he or she should be in this society. So I'm going to fight hard to send that message to the rest of the country. 안녕하세요. 제가 오늘 영어로 해서 죄송합니다. 제가 요새 한국말을 좀 많이 하고 있었는데 제가 오늘 좀 질문이 좀 힘들어서 제가 오늘 영어로 했습니다. 근데 제가 요새 계속 연습하고선 이제 그 election November 4th 끝나면 제가 시간 좀 있으니까 그때 제가 또 한국 연습부터 보고선 계속 한국말 연습하겠습니다. This campaign has been a really amazing, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for me. 저도 그 한인 커뮤니티가 얼마큼 대단했는지 제가 전부 이번에 봤어요. 제가 어릴 때부터 제 엄마가 아빠가 저한테 너는 한국 사람이야 꼭 저한테 그렇게 얘기했는데 제가 말 안 듣고선 계속 그건 잔소리라고 그렇게 생각했어요. 그런데 제가 정말로 2년 반 동안 제가 정말로 느낀 거는 얼마큼 한인 커뮤니티가 힘이 있고선 얼마큼 한인 커뮤니티가 저한테 중요하고선 얼마큼 이게 저 아이덴티티인지 제가 정말로 느꼈습니다. I've really been able to learn so much, and I'm still learning. I'm only 33. I have a lot more to learn in life. I think that what I've seen in this community, what I've seen during this campaign, is just remarkable. Every day, I go home, I think about the day, I think about the next day, and I sometimes before I go to sleep, I pray, and I think about what I've learned in this campaign, and all I can say is thank you. We've done so much. We've come so far. We have only a couple days to go. When I started this campaign, very few people believed what we can do. Even my campaign manager told me. He said, "Roy, I'm your campaign manager, but I didn't even believe that we can do it back then." He said a lot of people believe this would be impossible. We've received no national party support. National Party in DC, they've invested millions of dollars into other congressional races in other parts of the country. And nobody believed that me, being Korean American, being a first-time candidate, nobody believed that I would be able to come this close. But now, just recently, national media, national news, NBC just interviewed me yesterday, and the New York Times just did an article saying that this could potentially be maybe one of the closest races in the entire country. And we've done it without any national party backing or support. We've done it because people have really come together and believed that we can make this happen. I've always been raised to believe, I'm a Christian. I've always been raised to believe you can fear nothing or nobody but God, and I still believe that to this day. I don't believe that anything is impossible, and I believe that no matter what happens, it's God's will. If I win on November 4th, then it's God's will. If I don't win, it's God's will. But what I'm proud to say is that I've seen amazing inclusiveness. I've seen the Korean American community come together and support me in a way that I never anticipated. And what we've shown, not only northern New Jersey, but now we've shown the country, the entire country is watching this race. You have political pundits who are saying, in California, who are saying, look in New Jersey, because there's something special happening in northern New Jersey. You have a kid, a 33-year-old first-time candidate, who's this close to beating one of the most powerful members of US Congress right now. So we are on the cusp of really kind of doing a miracle. And all I can do is continue to work hard. I'm going to continue to get up every day earlier than Scott Garrett. I'm going to get up before he does. I'm going to go to sleep later than Scott Garrett. He's campaigning hard right now. He's never had to do it. But in my mind, it's too late because I've been doing this for a year and a half. He started a month and a half ago because he recognized that, this kid actually might beat me. But I'm getting... So I just want to say thank you to the people who are here tonight, to today. I don't even know what day it is right now. It's so busy, but I want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for your counsel. Thank you for your faith. And I will ask two things from now until Election Day. I ask that you continue to pray. 계속 기도해 주세요. Not that I win, but just pray that I continue to work hard and that we work hard. And then I'm going to also ask that on November 4th, no matter how busy you are, everybody's very, very busy. I completely understand. You have families and you have businesses. But please go out and vote. And also, please make sure that your friends and your family and your neighbors go out to vote. Because if we come out and vote, as a Korean American community, we can be the swing vote. And we can make history and pull off the biggest political upset in the country. And we can and we will beat Scott Garrett. Thank you so much.